Well, Hasan Basri Yalcin is a political analyst. He joins us now live in the studio for some analysis on the events that have taken place over the last, it's only been less than 24 hours. What do you make of this?
What do we make of this? It's not an easy question to answer. Actually, we haven't yet covered the entire story from my own perspective because we haven't yet seen, the government is still making some explanations about people to gather around the streets because they are still afraid of some kind of threat. We don't know what kind of a threat we are going to face, but the government especially asks people to stay on the streets until everything is going to be finalized. That reminds me that we should be aware of the fact that there is still some kind of threat on the streets. For that reason, it's not so easy to interpret the events. But as a consequence, probably we will see that things are getting better. Especially from my own perspective, getting things solved in at least 6 hours was a good timing. Yeah. But later on, we are still expecting some strange events.
Well, that's why I'm surprised actually to hear you say that they're encouraging people to stay out on the streets because they are afraid of some kind of threat. Because initially it seemed like they were encouraging this show of unity and to carry out this gathering of unity for as long as they could, to show to the rest of the world that Turkey is not an unstable democracy, that the institutions are in place and they are working. That's why I'm surprised to hear you say that this is actually more about combating a threat that's still very present.
No, actually, it's clearly indicated, it was clearly indicated that the problem is being resolved, but there might be still some other threats. It's possible. Remember, for instance, the case in Egypt. In Egypt, the COPE event took some different series. After 24 hours, another action happened in Egypt, and I think government is considering about these kind of repeating threats. Of course, Turkey is declaring that it's a stable democracy and people are gathering around the streets and showing their respect to the constitution and the rule of law and their democratic government. But at the same time, there is still a threat. 24 hours ago, there were aircrafts flying over the cities and there were huge battles. So it's not an easy task just to solve it.
Yeah, we do keep saying this all seems so surreal. I mean, if you had gone to bed at 10 o'clock last night and woken up at 7 o'clock this morning and gotten a normal night's sleep, you would never have believed what took place in that short time frame.
Actually, this is a good sign. Recovering so easily is a very good sign. From my own field of work as a person who studies on security issues, I'm familiar with that. In most of the security strategy documents of most of the countries, the issue of resilience and resisting terrorist events takes an important place. And governments, for instance, like France, United Kingdom, always warns their people to become resistant against these kinds of unexpected instabilities. In that case, we saw that Turkish people just gathered around the streets, were politically aware what were they doing, and they just tried to support their own democratic government. And for that reason, it seems to me that Turkish people showed a good resistance against these kinds of instabilities. From this perspective, actually, we can claim that we were talking in Turkey last year, 2 years ago, we were talking in Turkey that we will never experience some kind of a coup in Turkey anymore. But we didn't have any evidence of that. Right now, by this attempt of coup, we already have this evidence. Even if we have that kind of a coup attempt, we right now know that it's not going to be successful because people gather around the streets to support their own democratic government, and at the same time, police forces, government can smoothly work with each other to resist these kinds of instabilities.
And some analysts described it as a real act of desperation because this group of soldiers not only didn't have the support of the wider military, they didn't have proper public backing. Strategically, they seemed to execute things very effectively at the beginning, but then completely seemed to lose the game after just a few hours.
Actually, if you cover the entire story, you will see that they were doing wrong calculations both on the strategic and also tactical levels. They were also wrong on the political level. They were, okay, Turkish government is fighting with this kind of terrorist organizations, with this terrorist organization more than 3 years. And in all these cases, we saw that this organization has no public support. But this organization never considered that as a deficit. They were clearly aware of that deficit, but they never considered it as a shortcoming. They thought that strategically they can solve the problem, but we also saw that they were strategically failing on the field because we saw that despite their efforts in most of the events, they could not detain president, they could not reach to the prime minister. For that reason, they didn't calculate a very good strategic program.
So where does this leave the Turkish military now? I mean, the problem is Turkey needs its military right now. It needs the most professional and unified military possible to fight the terrorist threats that are out there.
Yeah, actually, the Turkish military was considered getting into a good shape in the last 5 years. But suddenly a new event emerged, and we right now don't know what kind of people are really going to take care of this military. But probably there will be a very huge reform in the military, because you cannot just keep going, okay, this works. No, it doesn't work, because there are hundreds of people in this military fighting against this country. For that reason, you have to solve this problem of military.
Right. And that's
a huge
I'm sorry, I'm being told, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Hasan, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Greatly
Thanks.
appreciate it.